I'm Peter Gagnon, the town manager. Restrooms, an important first floor. Men's and women's, we also have a few back here. Exits are clearly marked. Obviously, if there's any kind of emergency, you don't want to use the elevator. Each other out. If we do, if anybody with any disabilities and needs, we would go from the side door or through one door. So that's just our health and safety. Phil, was that good? Thank you. This is a board meeting, so I'm going to hand it off to our chairman, Eve Zornio, who will open up the public meeting, and then we'll go from there. I want to thank you all for coming tonight. And what I'm going to do is open the public meeting. And this is for flood relief and mitigation from town. And on that note, I'm going to pass it off right now here. Very good, thank you. Thank you all for showing up tonight. We have a lot of great panelists here. I'm very excited and happy to make it. So thank them, and of course, thank you as members of the community. We have representatives from Senator Shaheen's office, Representative Custer's office. We've got the newspaper. We've got local water sewer commissioners, planning board members. So a great turnout, local, state, federal. So very pleased. This could be the first of several hearings, certainly as needed. I'll point out the focus of this hearing is to really look at the 12/18 disaster and what we did as a municipality. And then moving ahead, we're going to talk longer term and what we're going to do in this area. Certainly, we've seen the news. Everything going on in the world is it's upside down, but it's crazy. I think we're going to be able to navigate through this. Before, though, I jump into our slideshow, I wanted to make sure everybody had a chance to know who the panel is. So I will ask Chris to grab a mic. Turn on. So Chris, please just introduce yourself and what your role is.
Yep, Chris Fournier with HEB Engineers. So we're a consulting firm working for the town of Gorham and helping them navigate this process with the regulatory agencies and looking to plan forward for solutions that will mitigate things to come.
Master Revel.
Right. Hey, good evening. My name is Matt Brown, and I am the state conservation engineer with USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service. So we have an emergency watershed protection program that we have administered over the past couple of storms in Gorham and in some of the neighboring towns. And so we can talk a little bit about some of our projects tonight and how that may affect, things going forward in Gorham and in the valley.
Thank you.
Good evening, my name is Richard Burgill. I'm with FEMA Region 1 Mitigation Division, Deputy Mitigation Division Director. We do have several programs that are administered for us by the state, and we do have a program in which we support our public assistance program in adding mitigation to damaged elements.
Evening, everyone. My name is Kayla Burks, and I'm the Infrastructure Branch Director for Region 1, FEMA Public Assistance. And it's my field team works directly with the Town of Gorham, here, and some of your other points of contacts to get through the FEMA Public Assistance process from start to finish.
Hi, everybody. I'm Bob Fogel, and I'm a federal coordinating officer for FEMA. So I'm responsible for overseeing a number of the disasters here in New Hampshire, and there are 5 local disasters that Kayla is responsible for, as well as Maine, Connecticut, and Rhode Island.
Good evening. Good evening. My name is Darlene Forrest. I am the current Wetlands Bureau Administrator for the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services.
Hi, I'm Alan Hanscom. I'm the state maintenance engineer for New Hampshire DOT and acting district engineer for the district one office.
Hi, I'm Adam McHale. I'm an engineer for the district one office in Lancaster, New Hampshire.
Good evening, Rob Buxton, the director of Homeland Security and Emergency Management for the state of New Hampshire.
Good evening, my name is Daniel Darks. I'm the Assistant Chief of Recovery in New Hampshire State, working with Homeland Security and Mitigation.
Michael L. Selectman,
Judy LeBlanc, selectman.
and he's going to select.
Great, thank you very much. Again, your attendance is very much appreciated. We will have the slideshow for what it is up on our website. We also have a Zoom recording, and the plan is to be able to host that ideally if it goes through well.
Peter.
Yes.
Let me introduce myself.
Oh, Phil Cludier, the man who many hats.
Yeah.
So I'm Phil Cludier, Fire Chief, Emergency Management Director. Many of you probably seen me out trolling around town looking at damage and stuff. Like, that's who I am.
Yes, we say the town of Gorham, well, really, it's Phil has been a great asset, a great team member, coordinating with FEMA, EPS, all of these folks. It's Phil and I who are really kind of the point people for all of this. So, starting off a little bit of history, not saying any of you are old enough to remember this, but this is 1927. Gorham historically has had issues with flooding. We are not unfamiliar with flooding and the damage that it brings. We've got photos from 27. You can see the devastation, rivers. Next slide there will be good. Again, railroad bridges, some of this isn't there anymore. They're very interesting. Thank you, Historical Society, for providing these. We have three major rivers, four actually. The Androscoggin is not the focus so much tonight, but we take a look at the Peabody River, we take a look at the Moose River, Moose Brook, and Tinker Brook as well. So these have been problems with Gorham for a while. If you think about it, we've been an island. The upper Peabody River, we've had issues up at White Birch, for a long time. One of the reasons I wanted to show some of those historic pictures and just give you a map is that, to me, this is a hopeful sign. We've been through this before. Our community, our parents, grandparents, people before that have been dealing with this for generations. So I'm not saying it's going to be easy. I'm not saying it's going to be fun, but we can make it through this. And our history has shown that. So that heartens me. Next slide. And then lower Peabody. So we've had flooding. The Peabody River jumped a little bit. There's been a lot of deposits that's come down. It's caused a debris field. Right where we have the Androscoggin River over here. You see that by the golf course, flooding down Bangor Street, Bell Street. The Peabody River itself took out hundreds of cubic yards of people's backyards. We'll talk more about those projects. And then, of course, the Moose River as well. Again, the river is getting more energy. During this flood event on 12/18, everything through there from Gateway, Trailer Park on one side of the river, all the way to Bellevue, the airport. There's a lot of infrastructure in these areas. We have our wellhead protection, we have municipal infrastructures, as well as neighborhoods. The sand pit. So where do some of these cars in the river come from? It was devastating, what happened here, where there's a bridge that washed out. Cars were washed away, propane tanks washed away, all down in the river, stuck on the bridges. We saw the pictures. And then one thing here, this is Tinker Brook, so this is up by the middle, Cascade Flats. Tinker Brook overflowed, flooded into the lagoons that were there. So these are some pictures from the 12/18 flood event. We see on Bangor Street, emergency vehicles, 3 feet at least, in water, rescuing people, getting folks out of that area. The Peabody River, like Birch, flooding the shores. We're not going to have hundreds of photos, but you know what's going on. Moose Brook off Lancaster Road, again, the flooding is catastrophic. we start to look at these bridges, and these bridges are going to be impacted, they're getting pounded. Again, some more flood pictures, Moose River near the airport, obviously that washout is fairly substantial. It's that the rivers are trying to find new ways to navigate to where they're going. The bridge, again, we worry about bridges being impacted with debris. You see how high that water level is. This view, the first picture is actually flooding going into the lagoons. The one to the right is Tinkerbrook empties into this basin. It's about the size of a racquetball, 2 racquetball courts. And there's 2 culverts. They're kind of the squished, non-efficient, non-effective things you see there. One of the reasons why this flooding happened was because you couldn't get water out of that holding area. And then some more pictures, again, culvert washouts, Spring Road, Jimtown, all had damage. Now, this immediate response from the town, we had emergency service vehicles out that afternoon. We had people in this room with their cats, with their children. We had people that were getting folks to a safe area. We were out digging trenches, trying to alleviate flood damage. Our road crews, our DPW did an excellent job. So this is some of the patching. As you know, Spring Road, Jimtown Road, you're cut off. We need to get these roads open. So some pictures of what we did for immediate road repair. Jimtown, as you saw, catastrophic, impassable. But again, with quick work with our crews, we jumped in and got those fixed. So the town jumped in, we repaired all of our roads. The Libby Pool had a lot of flood damage. The parking lot washed at Middle Street. The fields themselves, Town Forest Access Road, that was being repaired. There's berm repair on the lower Moose River. The town has also acquired land that abuts Libby Pool, so we picked up another 7.5 acres. So land in back of the softball and soccer fields is now owned by the town. The hope is to make that a natural attenuation flood zone. That is the plan for that. We worked with a lot of residents with NRCS. NRCS is a Natural Resource Conservation Service, USDA. They are the, I would say, the fast acting, we're going to respond to the flood. Is there damage to municipal infrastructure? What can we do? We've got a year window. Let's go in and try to see what we can do. We'll talk more about NRCS later. We also know we need help. We knew that HEB, quality engineering firm, has been doing this for quite some time. We were lucky to get Chris Fournier on board. And they've been working with us with all of our permitting and engineering our projects. And then, of course, Phil and I have been working with FEMA to get grant funding, to process through a lot of this paperwork and necessary work that needs to get done to get money back into the town. Phil, I'm not going to put you on the spot. What do we have so far coming in?
That to date, that's been reimbursed about 17,000?
Yeah, it's close to $20,000. And we've got more money coming in. A lot of that is for road repairs. So we have put in, FEMA has been wonderful to work with. They were here within days when the disaster declaration was made. We had a table much like this with all the players there. Army Corps of Engineers was there, DPS, Homeland Security, FEMA, etc. Multiple site visits. You probably tried to Phil, you posting it. I mean, they're coming around so much, we're there everywhere. We spent a lot of time and setting up to get the best product we could. Next one. So again, you all can read those. I'll point out this disaster is a public assistance disaster versus an individual assistance disaster. So with a public assistance disaster declaration, what that means is everything kind of has to pass through the municipality. And we're looking at damages to town roads, town buildings, town interests, town infrastructure. That is the key piece, to kind of trigger any kind of FEMA action, at that point. To a similar extent, Army Corps of Engineers, they care about that, the waters. They've been great to work with, but they have no money, for us. And, for them, they've been very supportive in our projects. And as long as we are working with the state officials and other federal officials, they've been really wonderful to work with. So if you're interested, the 4761 is what FEMA knows as, they don't call it 1218 for events. Just 4761, that was issued in February. Again, public assistance. We've been meeting weekly. The town and the board have been updated. If you listen to our town board of selectmen meeting minutes, you know we've been updating this for a long time. Over 40 different projects have been identified. 40 different problem areas in Moose River, Beauty River, Timberville. Multiple site visits. We have approximately $128,000, which is 75% recoverable, that we've identified so far. And as Phil said, we've already, 70,000 that has already come in. We have further engineering and project designs in place. And we're moving ahead for those. That's debris removal, this mitigation. And I can tell you the long-term approach. And I think there is no fix. There is no one fix. What we are looking for is a river-wide, river-length management system. Something that we can use to minimize flooding impacts. I wish there was X amount of dollars that we could snap our fingers and say, let's just bite the bullet, buy it once, try it once, and fix it once and for all. That is not reality. And we try to deal in a world of probabilities, not possibilities. We can't make our town resilient to 1,000-year floodings unless you all brought your gold bar. Oh, debris removal? Debris removal is the polite way to say dredging. Now, there is a difference. I would make the distinction because dredging might be technically, and we have an expert panel here, going below what the current riverbank or river bottom is. I would argue the debris removal is you have rocks and things that were someplace else that are now over here because of a disaster. So that would be different than dredging because we're going to make the riverbed back to what it was before the disaster. That's the conversation that, we have. So this is a slide from FEMA. Would anybody like to, from FEMA, like to just talk about this? For hope assistance, this is kind of a multi-step eligibility pyramid that they go through. And
Thank you. So what we're looking at is what we consider the public assistance eligibility pyramid. We do work from the bottom, going all the way up to the top. So we do first look to see if the applicant or Town of Gorham is an eligible applicant under public assistance, which you are. Next, we go to look at the facility to determine if the facility would be considered eligible. And how we determine that is by looking at legal responsibility. Once we determine that both the applicant or town and the facility are eligible, then we look at the actual work being completed. And we do look at that work in regard to our public assistance policy and guide. And then finally, we look at the costs, and we look to see if the costs are reasonable to the type of work being completed. And that is a very, I guess, a more flat look at how we look at eligibility for public assistance.
it is very dynamic. Thank you, Caleb. One question that pops up is, okay, legal responsibility. And who's responsible for the river, who's responsible for property? Again, if you're a private entity, you're the Burger King, you're the car dealership, you're the private entity. FEMA is not in this orientation here for you. They're here for the municipality as you said, a viable applicant. And then it gets into responsibility, and the board is very cognizant of this fact. If we claim responsibility and we get FEMA to say, great, we're gonna fund this project, that's a forever now project. So if we're building a berm, we're building an abutment, we're building something with FEMA money, you're gonna wanna know it's taken care of. You're gonna wanna know that the town is going to fix that. Because these are all of our federal tax dollars, and you don't want those to be wasted, to be built up for something, or that typical bridge to nowhere. You want to make sure that this will be maintained and it will be an investment. So we've also been doing a lot of work with NRCS, which is a USDA agency. We've met with Matt and his team several times on an ongoing basis for the last 10 months, and we went to up to 8 that we lost track. Like, was it 6? Is it 8? How many? It was at least 6, 8, maybe more. NRCS, and I'll let Matt, here's a question I'll ask you. In terms of the eligibility period, I have an understanding, but I'm going to ask you about that. Once we identified sites that met the eligibility requirements, things like, is this related specifically to the flood events? Okay, if it's not, it doesn't count. And I'll let Matt jump into that in a minute. But what we did is identify 4 sites. We moved forward with 3 of these projects, and you see them, they're out on Glen Road. There's 113, 115 Glen Road, and there's one on Bellevue Place as well. And these are river stabilization, berm projects, as well. There was a home demolition and riverbank stabilization on Glen Road. These are ongoing. I can happily report that within the next few days, these sites are going to start to be wrapped up. So by the end of the week, Bellevue will be completed. By the end of the month, we expect the Glen Road project to be completed. This is work that approached $750,000 that didn't have any cost for the town itself. So Phil and I were really happy to have that. Matt and his team did a great job engineering. We've been out on a regular basis. This particular piece is Glen Road. So we can see that house that's being demolished. And then, of course, the riverbank stabilization is being set. Matt, I promised to give you a chance. So what does it take to be successful in an NRCS project?
Yeah, like you mentioned that it can't be a pre-existing pre-storm condition. That's tripped us up on a few accounts where if this was something that was damaged during Irene and never fixed, we can't fund it now, even though it took more damage during the latest round of storms. So we've seen the 3 storms since I've been around. Irene, the Halloween storm, this last one, and it's got to be that last storm to qualify. It's got to have direct impact to property, and that property value is used in our economic evaluation, whether to do the work or not. The repair cannot be more expensive than the property value that is repairing. So and
we would jump in and look at value, economic value. So on Glen Road, we're talking about, well, Route 16. What's the economic impact of that? This is town infrastructure. If Bellevue Place washes out, what value does that have for the town? So it's not just individual property values, but it's actually municipal values that actually help get us over the hump to make those ratios make sense.
right, and then we have to have an alternative that's feasible, permittable, acceptable to the owner, to the town. even in terms of maintenance. You know, there's something they're gonna be able to do going forward. And that's been a little bit of a tricky thing, because these are private, in some cases, in both cases here that you see, these are private holdings. And we're asking the town as the sponsor to maintain a long-term maintenance relationship with the homeowner. And in the case of property transfers, how are we gonna figure that out? That's not something that I think we have figured out 100%, other than like good faith, good communication, good best efforts to inform new owners of, hey, the property that you bought it's got an NRCS project on it, and it's a long-term maintenance agreement between the town and the federal government. So that's something that is a little bit of a challenge, I think.
Yeah, that'll be, I think, discovered. One of the things that comes up is you think you have a simple process. What I've learned is, au contraire, it is no simple thing. It's never simple. It's never simple at all. Because you can get federal funding, get a project, homeowner, property owners agree, but then there's another element of working with state permitting. And then you think, okay, great, okay, call up my partners at DES, and okay, great, we know what we're doing, and it's good, and no, well, I mean, is this bad habitat? You know, is there endangered species here? Okay, we need to go talk with some folks to get a permit from them. And then, of course, because it's on a river, you have to reach out to residents and engineers. So even when you have funding, there's literally multiple other levels of permits that need to be met. And this is just an ongoing, we see the riverbank stabilization there on your right. And that work is ongoing. I have to say the bid process, the organizational skills Phil has, our bid process, site work has been really pretty slick. Permitting has gone very well. Partners have been good to work with. We try to be responsive to them. If they have questions, we get them the information. And so these are two examples of public-private projects that have worked out very well. So what are we doing moving forward? We're still in the process of FEMA reimbursement on some of the work we've done for culverts roads. We are looking at engineering. Typically, a regulatory agency is not going to say Phil and Pete and the Board of Selectmen want to do this. They're going to say, we want an engineering stand. Don't come with us with an idea for debris removal. We want to have an engineered plan. You want to build a swale? Is this a swale that's put together by Pete Gagnon? Who's he? They're going to want a swale or engineering done. So HEB has been key and important in this. We have ongoing kind of applications for improving a road culvert. The airport access road repair, sometimes we call that a snowmobile trail that washed out. We are looking for a longer term river-wide system, which is this brick, building resilient infrastructure in communities. And Chris, do you want to talk about that just a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, our folks at FEMA will be better versed on this topic as it's a program that they administer. But essentially the BRIC program is an annual opportunity for applicants to submit a project that has been an ongoing natural hazard issue with related to their infrastructure, generally speaking. And that offers the opportunity to apply for what's called a project scoping grant, which is really, I can be corrected at this point, but really aimed to fund the figuring it out process.
Right.
Of figuring out what the right solution there is, with the intent of a follow-up application to actually implement what was discovered as the right thing to move forward with.
Thank you.
Meeting permitting and cost beneficial feature. Yep.
And then I think, as Chris mentioned, FEMA was mentioned. So let's hear from FEMA. If anybody wants to talk about the BRIC grants.
Okay, so the BRIC grant, as Chris said, is an annual opportunity The 2024 program has not been announced yet. But it gives an opportunity, like Chris said, there's project scoping activities. And usually priorities under the BRIC program are actually set by the state. For the priorities that you're looking at, the priorities are also listed in the notice of funding opportunity. The state will have a set aside in which would be allocated to the state, and then there's a nationally competitive pot of funds that come along with which is a larger pot that comes along with the BRIC program annually.
Richard, what is the timeline on that? Like, let's say from the application process, a typical BRIC project, is it measured in months or years?
So I think last year's program, the application period opened sometime in September, closed at the end of February, and announcements of selections came on July 2nd. And once the selections are announced, that just means selected for further review, and that's where FEMA would go through and complete our environmental assessment of each project and work them towards funding. So this year we had made a lot of awards prior to the end of the fiscal year. I think the first awards went out. So they were selected in July and we made awards in mid-September.
So this would be the type of award that would allow us to fund an engineering plan to look at the river for a long stretch and look at opportunities to help control flooding, flood mitigation. Anybody on the panel want to jump in? What are some things we could do to mitigate flooding? Anybody on the panel?
So I'll
What do
just,
you mean by mitigate flooding?
Stop neighborhoods from flooding away.
Do you need this, but this will get picked up on a mic here? No?
No, go ahead.
Alright. So from the standpoint of mitigating flooding and what your causes are, I think it's important to realize that, first of all, what we're getting for rain anymore never used to be normal. But suddenly it seems to happen to someplace in the state every 6 months. So how do you possibly accommodate this? Looking at the maps of Gorham, looking at the terrain, looking at your history and your economic background, there's a lot of logging in your history. The rivers that are here are a lot straighter than they were naturally. So from a flooding standpoint, the two things that you can do are A, find ways to stop water from getting into the river, or B, try to slow down the flow of it once it's in there. You're like, one of the questions is, how on earth do you slow down water once it's in the river? The same way you slow down a truck coming down a hill. You don't want to take a large piece of heavy equipment straight down the hill. You want to switch back. The longer the distance for the drop, the slower it goes. Unfortunately, with the river being as straight as it is, it just accelerates. And the faster the water moves, it's like putting your finger over the hose. The faster it moves, the more material it moves. So when you talk about dredging in a river, that seems like a really good idea because you're creating volume and you're creating a place for sediment to go. Problem is, nature wants to fill that hole. Got to get the material to fill that hole from someplace. So it starts eating it off the sides, or it eats it off the bed, and it does what we call a head cut. So for us, from an environmental standpoint, what we see work, and this is something that Mr. Fournier, right, and I will probably be working on in the future, is looking at ways that you can either keep water from getting into the river, giving the river a chance to let some water out, and let some sediment out when it goes, on land that it's not going to hurt someone. Except that when this happens, damage is going to happen somewhere. The key is, how do you work with the river so that the damage goes in a place that causes the least economic and physical harm to people? You don't want it going someplace where someone's gonna get hurt. You don't want it going someplace where it's going to like crush your economic livelihood. to start looking for places that are, forgive the term, sacrificial. Like, okay, something's gotta be damaged, we want that damage to happen over there. How do you get that to be your safety valve, your release valve for the energy of that river? So when you're talking about mitigation, we're looking for ways in a long-term plan to help keep water out of the river, or at least slow down the rate that it gets there. And then find a way to slow it down once it's in there. That's not an easy solution, and that's a long-term plan about, it's not one single fix, it's a you tweak something, how's that working? Okay, that looks like it's working pretty good, how about if you try this over here? This is gonna have to be the town working with the state, working with an engineer over time to slowly find ways to take the pressure off the things that are most important to you. Now, I'm gonna acknowledge that the downside of that is that's a long-term plan, and that's not always the easiest to fund. It means you're looking for small amounts of funding, or for everyone in this room, I'm sure that amount of funding never looks small, but you're looking for chunks of money over time. Instead of one big chunk all at once. And all I can tell you is us from a state agency, if it's a well thought out plan and you're coming to us with this is what we want to do, this is why we want to do it. We understand there's risk, but it's the best risk for all of us. That is the type of thing that we at DES can work with you on, and the Army Corps would work with you. Does that help?
Yes, thank you. So again, there's not one simple solution. You know, we started to call these attenuation zones or flood zones, where we can let the water off, and maybe, you know, it's a beneficial habitat. You said sacrificial areas. We don't have a lot of farmland here. I know other parts of the state, you talk to Farmer Brown, and he's got 50 acres of land, and is there some way we can get, you know, kind of the Saco River or whatever river system to kind of, this is where it can go. We don't have that luxury here, as you said, because of our geography. So the dredging, berming our way out of problems isn't really a fix. And talk to any engineer who's been here for a while will say, you dredge an area, it costs money, and within 6 months or 18 months, it's right back where it started from. It's right back where it started from and all that money. If you don't recall, FEMA money is typically 75-25. So FEMA might come forward and say, here's this wonderful project, it's well engineered, it's well designed, we're good partners, here's $2 million, here's $3 million. The quick math in my head is, that's $500,700, I mean, that's 25, wow, that's, wait a minute, oh, that hurt. Well, that's like $500,700, wow, that's a lot of money that we have to come up with. So even though it's a great deal, 25 cents on the dollar, we're talking about large projects that the selectmen have to sort through. And there are ways to kind of just, what we call stack grant money, maybe offset some of those things. But still, we have to think about that moving forward. So this slide, again, is just on debris, what we just talked about, you know, temporary solutions. One piece that's always tricky is determining the legal responsibility. Who owns the rivers? Who on the panel wants to say who owns the rivers in New Hampshire?
Here we go, I'll do it again. So this is 30 years of surface water permitting experience coming to you. So in New Hampshire, any pond greater than 10 acres in size, and our law in New Hampshire goes right back to the King's Law and sovereign exchange and how the colonials took authority over the land after the Revolution. So any pond greater than 10 acres in size, the state holds the bed in trust for the people of the state. No one owns it, it's like the commons. However, any river that is not a tidal river is held in bed by the private owners, usually on either side of it. So riverbeds are owned by the abutting property owners. Every individual who owns riverfront property should look at their deed, because it'll either say to the bank of the river or to the center line of the thread. That's just the way common law in New Jersey was formulated from our start after the Revolution and how it's run all the way through. This is why we own the low water side of Connecticut. Now, because it's privately held, and because you have a history of subdivisions in New Hampshire, some weird things can happen. How was the deed written? If when the larger parcels were subdivided off, the person who subdivided said to the bank of the river on this side, you own the water, and to the person on the other side, to the bank of the river, the spread of the channel and the riverbed is still owned by whoever subdivided and sold that land. Which means the ownership of riverbeds in New Hampshire is a patchwork of really difficult deed research. Don't let your kids do it because they're gonna be written in cursive after 1850 something. They don't know that language probably. So there is no single owner. This is something that we routinely run into, and that's actually one of the problems for us when we permit. Because we can't give you a permit to do work on land you don't own. You have to have permission from that landowner. So one of the most difficult things about working with this system, and one of the things that the town is going to work on, or to think about how you want to manage, is how do you get the community along the river to understand, look at your deed and say, yes, I'm going to give the town permission to make my property part of this project. That's also why it's very important to us that when we're doing permitting, we have to consider who gets, like, where do the damages go? Because we, by law, cannot permit a project which adversely impacts a landowner who didn't sign on. We can't. So that's really one of the, I think from a town, I don't know how you organize that, but for folks, anybody who owns riverfront, find a copy of your deed and see what your property line is. Do you own the top of the riverbank, or do you actually own the center line of the channel? That's gonna be one of the single biggest pain in the backside moving forward, is how to get everyone to sign on and be a part of this process for those parts of the river you want to work with. And I don't know how the town of Gorham was actually formed. If, for instance, it started as a very large piece of property and maybe some of it was needed. But yeah, you have some research to do amongst yourselves on who owns what and how do we get everybody to actually work together in partnership.
And you make a great point, and it's true. It's easier for us when we have town-owned property than obviously we own and we can do work. But when it starts to be private, you get this little kind of swamp of what it is, you get in the weeds, literally. But you also, there's a distinction, ownership and jurisdiction. So whether you might own this, but you don't have jurisdiction to get into the water and do anything with your property, even if you say, like he says, out in front of the river, you don't have the authority to build a dock or go out and do anything to it, you don't own it, you need, because DES has jurisdiction, or if it's down to the water, or engineers might have jurisdiction. So there's this multi-layer piece. So it's not just ownership, approved it, then you need the other folks that have jurisdiction to allow you to do something on that part. So just an example of all the things still align in time, and you're working as well. So moving forward, as you've heard, we are requesting funding for investigating river-wide systems for keeping those rivers. Typically, as we mentioned, this is a whole river system that's going to include a lot of different things. I'm sure in the next few years there'll be a lot of really exciting engineering that might, and I've seen this even talking with some of these experts. What they did 10, 15 years ago is the standard policy today. They learn, and what works, what doesn't work. And this, for the concept of unintended consequences is real. So you think you're gonna do a great project over here, and it's fabulous. You really need to think through the unintended consequences, because you just create maybe a bigger problem down the road. So we're, going through this, working again with our partners, I can't say enough. What a good experience it's been. Working with our federal state partners, reaching out to the communities, everybody has been on board and wanting to help. So that has been great. So funding is going to be a problem. This is going to end up being a warrant article down the road, more funds, there's a certain CRS for river maintenance. All the things we talked about. We have to be aware of marine, animal habitat. approval of all the right permitting bodies. And again, realizing this is really an ongoing process. It's an ongoing process. So we are continuing right now, we're wrapping up our AICS stuff. We're continuing to work with the HED and FEMA on these whole river studies. We're focusing on the airport road that washed out the snowmobile trail. And we would like to promote, thoughtful discussion about how to make sure people like this all work together as efficiently as possible. There's different ways, blanket permits, longer term permits, these types of permits. I would love it if FEMA could, and this is off the top, but if FEMA could go to you see this stuff all the time, every week, every month, for years, you know what a washout culvert is, a bridge, you know how much that is. I mean, you have an idea of range. And if you could go to a community and say, you have two options, the FEMA inspector says, this is a $15,000 fix. You can take that number and then we can fast track the funding. Or if you want to, do your own engineering, do your own stuff and tell us it's going to be $20,000. Okay, fine, we'll listen to that and we'll have it the normal way. But it would be a way for smaller municipalities who don't have road agents and the ability to hire engineers to say, look, here's a fast track, we're experts, we see this stuff all the time, you needed a bridge, you need a 36-inch culvert, it's 20 feet long, you do this all the time, this is about what it would cost, are you good with that? This is fun. We don't like it. Bill, next slide, so we will have time now as planned, we moved through that kind of quickly, I apologize. If anybody has a question or comments, please use the mics we can all hear. And then hopefully we can have a good answer from the panel. Who's first? Well, maybe Colin. And teacher vote back up. People start. Okay, York.
Good evening, panelists, thanks for coming out here. So my first question, I guess, obviously this town relied all of these multiple projects in multiple problem areas. But specific to entrance on Route 16 coming into town, my question is to the DOT panelists. So just on the south side of town, just as you're leaving or just as you're coming into town right before the east, is where we had a mudslide where the clay bank washed down within DOT's right of way. You guys have 33 feet inside the center right there. So what is the proactive plan to mitigate any issue with that stream that crosses right there that is virtually buried? Does DOT have any plans to mitigate that prior to that road getting covered and we have to pay them?
No, we have no effort in the work at the moment. We're hesitant to go claim the water too much. I'm not really familiar with what it looked like prior to to be careful about just the jogging and explained excavating the river or the brook. But we've been looking at it closer, and check with some local knowledge kind of thing, but we have no meeting.
And the reason I ask is that can have direct economic impact if that covered with clay or silt or anything like that, where you couldn't have people, there's a large amount of people that travel from Gorham or Conway to work, vice versa. And so if that road get covered, and it's gonna get covered, it's just a matter of time. So that's why I asked.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Mother Nature tends to recover what she's lost sometimes, so it may get re-excavated without any effort on the part, but we can.
Thank you. So I'll do another question, this Lyman. So during the rain event in December, Libby Pool overflowed during, for various reasons, rain coming off of Route 16, flooding from the puberty that overtook, that animation zone that is planned to be built here. And so, after the flood event, and I'm the abutter adjacent to the pool. And so one of the things that we realized during that rain event is that it was human error that did not, number one, lower Libby Pool before this rain event, which is well, predicted. So that was the first problem that happened. The second problem is the overflow channels or the overflow culverts, were not cleaned out in time. The third problem was human error where the gate valve wasn't opened up until noon or 11 o'clock during an event. And so I let it simmer for a couple months before I provided a letter to the selectmen and pictures, documentation, and I asked that that get read in the selectmen's meetings with it being a public document. It did not. I went through and looked at all this, none of that ever happened. It got swept under the rug. My question is, what is being done? Apparently, as far as the selectmen is, in the town manager has said, oh, we've made, provisions for this. But nobody's ever said what the provisions were for instances like this. Is there gonna be something put in place for mechanic, so it doesn't go on human error? You know, what is the plan for that? Does anybody have a plan?
I can say, the board has discussed this. There is a plan, I'll when I go to the board, but while I'm doing that, Mark, that's a great question. The town has taken some steps to engineer a swale in that area. We've talked about staging, next time we have a rain event, we know we're gonna have 3 days of rain. We'll stage a piece of equipment there, so we don't have to call somebody else or friend to come and do that. So if there is any kind of emergency piece that needs to be excavated, it's right there. And the other part is that it wasn't just rainwater, the Bureau of Dams. I know I was missing somebody, I should have the Bureau of Dam Bureau. Don't forgive me. Anyway, the Dam Bureau came out and took a look. And they frankly were impressed, like, yeah, there's not enough water in here. Yeah, they could wash down the driveway. Yeah, this pool, this dam, it's nothing with it. But what made that a big burger, what made it a big problem was the Peabody River that came through. So Libby Pool itself, yeah, overflowed, it was the Peabody River that went off course that came through. Even if Libby Pool was drained, it might fill up within how many minutes if the Peabody River comes through there. So that's the bigger, scarier problem, honestly, than just that, but I'll let the selectmen take this.
So for, you know, we talked about this a lot, but for the benefit of everyone else here. That event, I was present for that, I saw Libby Pool overflow. And there were various town employees quite helpless at the moment. I count myself among them because it made no sense what I was seeing. It made no sense that there was tree limbs floating across Libby Pool. If it was coming from the inlet only, then there would have been no brush. But the brush immediately clogged the only culvert to leave as an overflow. And to just give you a sense for how a simple solution can become an undoable thing. You know, Bert, you did the command decision that day. Lee Corrigan showed up, and then the town backhoe showed up. And in the vicinity of the culvert was, a ditch was dug, and the water poured then into an overflow stream, which is what we've used for years, but for much smaller quantities of water. So when I was looking at it after the fact, I thought, Jesus, you know, this is not a big deal. Why don't we just make a shallow swale here at the top, so that anytime water comes in from whatever the source, it would flow freely out to the Peabody. And we brought this idea up with, one of the representatives, I'm an engineer for the Dam Bureau. My goodness, by the time we were done, because you haven't got all night, but by the time we were done, my simple little swale, might have been $10,000-15,000 to do. Yeah, the rough number on that was $125,000. So that's a simple. With regard to the Peabody changing course, right? We've heard tonight about you can't dredge your way out of a problem. And there's a lot of truth in what I've heard. But it is also true that when you have gravel bars building up in any stream or river, it can create unsolvable problems for the abutters. The case that I'm talking about, the river simply changed direction because gravel banks forced it into a new direction. And it barely, I mean, it doesn't go cubic foot of water, 1 foot by 1 foot by 1 foot. Based on my history with this, I'm gonna say maybe 35, 40 cubic feet per second made its way into the pool. That's not very much. It's a good sized brook, but it's no raging river. Bear in mind that in the Peabody River that day, it was 13,600 cubic feet per second. So had just 1,000 cubic feet gone the way the 35 cubic feet went, and that pool had been bone dry. The time to fill it, according to my calculations, which I'll grant you are rude and rudimentary, but basically sound, 3 minutes. 3 minutes. So the real problem to be conquered here is the river has already decided to change its direction in a flood event. We've seen it, and so we've on dry land started to build a berm that can divert it back into the river. And it also will flood 7 acres of land that wasn't flooding before. So that's our solution to the big part. Onto the dereliction of the town's responsibilities, I guess, for a better way of saying it. We would prefer not to focus, certainly in the public session, on individuals. But the town and the full board of selectmen recognizes what you're saying, and we agree with it, that there needs to be better monitoring in that area. At times, not only high, but when the water isn't. You know that since that event, I go down there and I see the pool being unnecessarily high. He can tell you he gets informed that it's unnecessarily high. So I know that's maybe not all the answer you want, but that area is for the board of selectmen one of half a dozen really high priority problem areas, because we're looking at the potential of losing the houses all the way down Mill Street, Washington Street, right back into the Peabody. It's a really dangerous situation, which hopefully we will be able to control. I'll turn that goes into the meeting for the
Thank you. Yeah, we're still, Phil just reminded me, we haven't been the dam report from the Bureau of Dams to report. And that should be here in the week. They also took a look at the dams over at Cascade Flats, maybe the lagoons, as they're called. So other questions? Raj.
From having watched different flood events since we moved up here in the 70s, especially in more recent years, then reading about a long flooding history of Gorham. I mean, it's not just the 1927 flood, that was big, that was a huge one. And the town and the state ended up dredging the entire Peabody from up by Stony Brook all the way down to the end all winter. They worked on it. I recall that they spent more money that year than the entire town budget to dredge the FEMA 1927. And into 28. When the 38 hurricane occurred, I think it was another storm, not quite as big. The reports were that there was very little flooding or damage, even because of that work they did in 1927. The other thing that comes to mind is that when I talked to Roger Kilmack, the former roads foreman, he spent a lot of time on getting the moose, the upper part of the moose, dredged. They didn't work with FEMA because FEMA wasn't around until about 1979. They worked with the Army Corps of Engineers. They got permission. They got Couture Construction, I believe, to come in. And they basically had excavators, dozers, and they so-called dredged the river, built up berms that are on Moose right now. You can see elements of those berms in many, many places. And those are protected. Different houses, the trailer park, the houses over by the airport for many, many years. But as we saw with the recent storm last November, some of them started to fall apart, or actually blew up. Nothing is forever, as people have said, that's true. But you do have to maintain them. Final comment is that I remember numerous discussions in recent years, especially in the aftermath of Irene, where whether it was the planning board, whether it was the budget committee or a town meeting, people would ask questions like, well, when's the town or somebody going to fix that berm that you guys built back in the 60s? And the town response from the selectmen and from the town manager was, we don't know who built it. Well, it wasn't the property owners, it was the town. And most property owners don't have the wherewithal, they don't have the equipment, they don't have the money to build and repair these berms on an ongoing basis. And one of the frustrations for me, I'm lucky because we live on the English-Dog, we happen to have a big sewer line right behind your house, all the way down from the upper village, down behind the high school, behind our house, behind Michael Dell's house, etc., all the way to the town water sewer treatment plant. When I asked Robin Frost if the bank started to erode behind your house, it has eroded a little bit. Luckily, not a lot because it's controlled by dams. I said, if it started to erode, would the town fix that bank? She said, oh, absolutely, because the sewer line is there. And I said, would you charge us 20 or 25% to fix it? No, because we're fixing it for the sewer line. So some of us who live near a sewer line or a road, some of the public access we're not given, we're not being asked to shovel out $20, $30, $40, $50,000 and to maybe do it repeatedly. I guess along these lines, the final comment is I think that in my experience, my feeling is that the town has struggled to do some of this work. Done better in some years and poorly in some years. But for the most part, it's been done kind of on a piecemeal basis. I do feel like with this recent storm, that there's been some movement towards taking a different direction and being more forward-thinking and responsible. And it happened on the berm behind Bashaw's and Broadway and Water Street, where the town, probably because some of the property owners were pretty desperate. The water was coming right over that. That's a poor berm, it's not very big. And they were struggling to deal with that, and the town jumped in and helped. That's probably the first time it's happened in a long, long time, since I'm thinking since the 60s. And we've got other parts of town, like in Peabody, all of Peabody, that had no berm whatsoever. Or maybe they washed away, because the last time it was done was 1927, it's a long time ago. So we've got berms in places, and berms that were never built, and berms that are falling apart completely. Final comment from us, I lived and worked in Sacramento gravel and elsewhere. Berms are not, I've been on berms that are 30, 40 feet tall, protecting major parts of Sacramento. Of course, they have a little more snow out there. Snow, we don't. But berms and levees is not uncommon. And I kind of feel like the town hasn't really come to that conclusion yet, that maybe we should look at more berm levees and do some dredging.
Thank you, we're going to look at more questions to the board, because it's not just Gorham, it's a lot of communities, we're not seeing the community around here. Now, they do berms, we know how to make berms in the next community. Anybody on our panel want to describe, when did the kind of regulatory shift, paradigm shift happen, where burning and dredging were just kind of what towns could do, put it in the river? Was that the 1980s? Was that the 90s when that kind of stopped? Where you couldn't, as a town, legally just jump in the river with a machine and go for stuff?
1967 would be when the wetlands law passed.
And then, so some of the anecdotes I hear about, they used to dredge, in the '70s. So that was all done legally,
I don't know how hard you actually look to find permits.
right? Because if you don't, I haven't checked with Army Corps of Engineers and Army Corps of said, we don't have any record of building these berms up into this river, at least none that we can find, which can be frustrating. So they kind of said, we didn't build them, we're not responsible.
Yeah.
We don't mind if you want to do stuff. But is it easy today, if we went to wetlands and said the town has found money, we want the state lottery, or all the community wants to generate one of those $2 billion. Would that be an easy process?
So so speaking for DES, Wetlands Bureau's jurisdiction, if it's not an actual wetland on a river, ends at the top of the bank, so bank road. So if you went back 15 feet from the top of the river, you put berm in, you're not in wetlands jurisdiction, you're in protected shoreline. Can you do that under protected shoreline? Yeah, you probably can. There's nothing in shoreline that says you can't do this. There'd be some vegetation issues. So, yeah, the fact that, the idea that DES somehow prohibits this, no. When it's our problem, good to tell you.
Oh, you,
Some places it'll work, some places it won't, it'll be trial and error. So berms, not as a non-issue. The dredging, again, 1967, even before 67, there's a wonderful case from 1955, 57, where we were billing somebody for the gravel that they were hauling out of, Lebanon and the Connecticut River in Lebanon. We were billing them as if it was state land. Court found it wasn't. That was fun. I wasn't there to see it, but it's a great case to read. So as far back as 57, there was already a presumption that dredging needed some kind of state approval because they were charging you as if it was state land, or the landowners. So it's not a new thing by any means. I'm curious, as the gentleman mentioned that in the 70s, there was a massive dredge and berm. How many property owners were involved? Was it all just like timberland?
Town funded,
What?
it's all town funded,
It's all town funded. Who owned the land?
private citizens did,
And they didn't, let's see.
they didn't have to pay a dime.
Okay, so here's the question, and obviously the whole town is, no one arguing. There's gotta be something somewhere to document that, there has to be. The question is, where?
My property is built 121 Glen Road. We had two, and I'm very, very grateful to the NRCS. We have been, the recipients of 2 grants from the Department of Agriculture on our property. The first one was Irene, and then the second, then Irene was damaged in Philippines, which was a tropical storm in the fall of 2017. And Sandy was before or after that. We came back and extended, did some damage, did some assessment on the damage from the original work on the stone bed. And hardened that, and added upriver, because I was talking to Matt Brown earlier about this, and we talked about key waves and how they have to be. But we're built all the time, probably before we built, it was the best idea, best visual of this berm, Peachtree River, and it was the second whole subdivision. And that berm was built by steam-powered equipment in 52. And it was a massive berm, and we built behind it. We built a slough behind that berm, and that slough obviously was created by the Peachtree River, almost all the way to 16. And we brought 5,000 yards of building. We excavated the foundation. You can picture this with a bulldozer and built 8 foot and filled around it. But that berm was destroyed in by Irene. It was the pieces of it left, but it was pretty well destroyed. And that berm was quite high. So, but in regard to the berm situation, I don't know who on the panel can help me with this, but the Supreme Court in June of this year, they overturned the Chevron doctrine. Is anyone familiar with that?
Yeah. The
Thank you,
Chevron.
because and I kind of want to know, that really pertains to what we're talking about, berms, no berm, and a whole bunch of other things. I guess it's called now Chevron deference, because now there's going to be judicial deference rather than only regulatory stuff going on in the doctrine. It's new, it's brand new. I don't think there's any case law, and I think it pertains to federal and not, I don't think it pertains to state, but eventually will come downhill to that. I was hoping somebody from the Army Corps was here. Does anybody know anything about the overturning of it's my understanding that when this was overturned, that, that if there was any, in the past, if there was any discussion about which way to go in an environmental EPA type issue, that, that the regulatory agency, federal one, but I don't think it would be the EPA, would have final say on that. And now, through judicial deference, they basically are saying now, if it looks like there are 2 different ways to approach a problem, and I think, as we've been talking about berms and berm, there probably are 2 when we're talking about the brick projects that FEMA was talking about. Down the road, I'm willing to bet this overruling is going to play a part in that, because it's my understanding that if there are 2 different ways to solve an issue, and it isn't clear cut, that the present regulatory agencies are going to have to present their case in front of the courts with an opposing opinion. So if somebody could,
So yeah, Chevron deference, you're correct, it's a case, that you did a good job describing that. So like the EPA or the ATF, the courts would defer to the experts. So the presumption would be the ATF or the EPA knew about clean air, clean water, and if they said graphite or lead isn't good for the environment, then they could pass regulations to restrict lead. And we would give deference, right, for them. Or the EPA would say, oh, radon is bad for you. We're now going to control radon or whatever, gluten for clean air quality purposes. So the courts did overrule that and say, yes, now a judge will understand if somebody came in and said, maybe radon isn't that bad for you. Or maybe lead isn't as bad for you as the EPA says it is. You'd fight it out in court and then you'd move on. It could impact us, but all the regulations we're all talking about are pretty straight black and white.
It'll impact the federal, it won't impact the state.
Correct. Yeah, okay, that would be, and again, FEMA is another on walls and strengths, they're this helping fund, so it wouldn't really impact that as much. So what I'm gathering is, berms could be okay, but we can't use free material dredged up from the river, because that was a 2-for-1 that people used to like to do, let's dredge the rivers, take the spoils.
Not a permit for dredging the river, then you could use that for the burn, but you could not take a permit for dredging the river.
Oh, certainly. Yeah, and then that could be a thing, that again, with this whole river system study, there could be places where that might be.
Stockpile, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Where do we stockpile that?
So I'd like to address, the burn thing. Yeah, be nice to have a time machine to go back. Because the public works would go in the river with a dozer and, or someone would be hired to go in the river with a dozer. They've been pretty short work of it. Something that most people don't really realize is that gravel being pulled out as a value per ton, a cubic yard, depends how you want to measure it. It's not junk. And people pay a lot of money for it. And oftentimes, in the past, you talk to some of the older dirt guys, you remember this. They would agree to dredge out these gravel banks that were causing problems in different places, simply for the value of gravel. I remember reading not that long ago that FEMA actually wrote a rule that says you couldn't do that. So I'm sure they wrote it for a good reason, probably more interested in making money than solving the problem for the common good. But having written the rule, they made it so enormously expensive to go into the river that among many other things, is why you don't see public works departments around the state cleaning out rivers in a wholesale fashion. So I don't disagree with anything, you said about the past. I have no idea whether the town paid for that. I know this town paid for projects like it in certain areas, and I was around to see it. I mean, Roger was part of the planning process on a couple of projects, one of them went by you. So yes, that happens. The question is, what can we get away with today without having the heavy hand of federal and state government down on the small town of Gorham for having not followed the rules? That's really the difficulty. Now, I have a question for someone on the panel, and there may not be anyone here to answer it. One of the committees they sit on is a Nash Stream Advisory Committee, and one of the things that happened up there is Nash Stream went through a dredging fill. And there was a dam that let loose there in the 60s, and it created essentially a gravel run through of what had once been a great trout stream. And so Trout Unlimited and others got together, we spent, I think, $1.2 million, and they put excavators in the river. And if you look at what they've done, yes, they slowed the river down. It's a great trout habitat, and it floods a lot less than it used to do. So I think that's the kind of win-win model that we can see here along our rivers. But there's no way to solve the problem that we have here in Gorham along the Peabody, Moose River, Moose Brook, without machinery in the river. A simple problem is that all three of those rivers run through miles of gravel pit. Gravel pits filled with clay. And when it floods, and these rivers haven't been straightened for driving logs, the topography, you just have to look at the contour map, and you can see the river can only be where it is. I know what you speak, and I've seen it in other areas, but here you're pretty much looking at river beds that move very little, like maybe 100 feet this way or 100 feet that way, because they run into cliffs. So part of the board's desire to go with the BERT grant
is towards solutions like this, where we can engineer an ongoing maintenance plan, and then at least in my opinion, I see, embankments that are berms, dikes, call them what you will, and populated areas. I see areas that are protected so the water can come out and flow out into them, not just slowing down, but reducing volume. And I see a regular regime where you're moving gravel banks this way or that to make the river stay within its channel. At this point, one of the things that is not really being paid attention to, but should be, is that Irene put something like 20,000+ feet per second underneath that bridge on Route 2. And this platform, then in 2017, we had 17,000+ underneath the bridge. And the most damage we received in the last storm was 13.6. So you can follow the pattern where the water volume is going down and the damage is going up. And the fact is that since about the 1980s, there hasn't been any significant gravel removal done. So I don't disagree that there are circumstances where you take gravel out, or straighten the river, and it does just exactly what was stated. Absolutely documented, absolutely true. But it's also true that when you go down the golf course and you're standing on the bridge, you're looking at the golf course on your right, water and sewer is on your left, and right in front of you is a dam of gravel that is at least 80 feet tall. So graphically, folks, you raise the level of the highest flood water 8 feet, and the water is going to come up 12, and it comes up 20. If you remove that dam, it drops 8 feet. And I don't know the solution other than you sacrifice the entire golf course. That happened. Those property owners probably aren't going to cooperate with that as a long-term plan, nor are all the property owners that are just to the south of that bridge, who live in houses along Niagara Street, Washington, Mill Street. You get the picture. So if someone is familiar with this kind of new look at how we manage rivers, I know that they're doing it on the Salem River now, and they're also doing it, or have done it at Nash Stream, just a shot in the dark. Just address that.
All right, so there's been a few different things said here that I want to go back and clarify, just because I don't want folks to be confused. First things first, there's been some comments about debris removal. Now, the gentleman said early on that you can argue, does debris just mean woody debris and trash that falls into the river during a flood event, things get swept in, or is it mineral material? One can argue the point. Yeah, we're all going there, we can argue a lot of points. Come from a generation of people who really like to do it. But when it comes to how different laws are written and rules are written, you have definitions. So what may be one person's definition when you're working inside a rule set, our definition in New Hampshire wetlands is different than the FEMA definition. So it was said that you can't remove debris from the river without a permit. Well, that's some really dangerous misinformation. Woody debris and trash does not require a permit. There is a specific exemption in New Hampshire law, in wetlands law, that says you can clean out culverts and bridges. In fact, we want you, that's why there's an exemption, because we want you to go clean out the culverts and bridges. That is generally limited to the woody debris not the mineral material which we consider to be the bed of the river. Beds of rivers move, usually not the way we want them to. There was a discussion of berm, so please, if you have woody debris around you, trash, get it out of the river, don't think you need a permit, you don't.
Who's responsible for getting that stuff out of the river? That's what I wanna know.
Who's it? Okay, so we're gonna argue about responsibility instead of just taking it on our own. I mean, do you want the state to come do this for you? And I'm sorry, because I'm gonna this is your challenge. Who's responsible for doing it? You as a landowner, or are you gonna?
I think town is responsible to go and remove that tree or those stumps that are in the river and not the landlord. That's just my opinion.
It's, whose feet are it?
Huh?
Whose feet are it? Do we want it to, here's what it comes down to. You wanna take time arguing about whose fees they are and who has to come get them until it floods again? Or do you just wanna take it? Everybody has to make this decision for themselves. Every one of us in New Hampshire who's been affected by something like this, you can decide that you're gonna go out and know you can do it and take action and do what you can to help, or you're gonna take some time, sit back and say, it's not my problem. Who's gonna do this for me?
So the problem is, there's a lot of people that own the property don't have the equipment to be able to go in the river to take a big tree out or a big stump out. Or sometimes you have to cut the tree up in order to get it out of the river. Most people don't have that equipment to be able to do that. Where the town does, the town has people that work for the town that have dredged this river before. So they know how to do what they gotta do, and they could easily go in there and take that debris out of the river.
So work within your community if you can find people. What I'm telling you is the state is not in your way.
Okay,
In this case, what I want to tell you is, as a state agency, we are not in a way, because we recognize this is a problem and we are not value added when it comes to debris in the river. So your legislature has gotten us out of the way when it comes to debris removal.
perfect.
When it comes to the dredging of mineral stuff, that's because A, has value, and B, you don't have much land around. So we get a little about that. The other thing that was said was about the berms. When it comes to berms, if the berm is not in the river, if you have a berm that's older than 2008, 2008 is when permitting came into effect for shoreline. If you have a pre-existing berm older than 2008, it's grandfathered under shoreland because it's not in the river. You can repair those on a PBN. It's just that it sounds like nobody asked. So the state is not in your way on berm repair of existing berms. We can permit those. I know, I wish I knew who I could find the money for you for that, but the state is not in your way for that. Existing berms, you can document them. They, even if you can't document who built them, they usually stick out like a sore thumb on the landscape. If you can show they're older than 2008, that's grandfathered under shoreland. You can do it with a PBN. That's easy. That's the worst case scenario, like, some of them might not even be in shoreland jurisdiction. So that's fine. When it comes to actual dredging of mineral substrate, the idea that there was a sand berm at the bottom of the Peabody River and the golf course, did we or did we not permit the dredging of that? Did we deny it? And I guess my question was, did anybody ask? Because this is the thing, and I've already said this. If you guys have a plan, DES and the Army Corps, that's who I'm speaking for. We are committed to looking at this problem and working through the permitting. We are not just gonna tell you, no, you can never do this again. You're just gonna have to deal with it. If you guys choose to put levees up and down, because that's what they're normally called if you're in the South. If you're gonna put levees up and down either side of this river, and just deal with the fact that when it rains, everything's gonna come down. It's either gonna get stacked up behind the levee, or you're just gonna put full whatever in that channel, shuttle it down that riverbank as fast as you can and hope it don't come over. If that's what the best case solution for you is, it's gonna be dredge and levees. Mr. Fournier does his job and we come back with it and said, yeah, I guess that's what it's gonna be. And that's what you'll get a permit for. And you'll keep doing this again and again, and somebody's gonna keep paying for it. But what I don't want you to think is that the state has somehow come in here and said, you can't do this. Because to my knowledge, nobody's asked yet. when the time comes and you have a request, we are happy to work with you. The solution that we can't find, and it's not just Gorham, I've been dealing with this around the state for every flood event that we've had, and everybody's been hit so far, except I think maybe Nashville. Who's gonna pay for this? And I wish I had an answer for you, and I don't. But do not think that permitting is your problem. We will get the heck out of the way when we think you have a viable solution. The question is about how much can you do at a time? And how the heck are we gonna pay for all this?
And I'd second that. We get a PBN for the work we did on the moose. That was a great process. Your people were great. We pulled together a little bit of money, a DPW crew, we had some skilled folks. And behind Vashaz, there was a couple, maybe 30 feet, 40 feet. We're able to basically take care of that. Again, PBN, that was easy. NRCS, we have two, I mean, we're talking several hundred feet of riverbank stabilization. And Army Corps was great to work with, and so was DES. I mean, I thought what do we call those? Not restrictions, but with the permit came,
Conditions.
conditions, thank you. The conditions were really very easy, like turbidity. Make sure you have something to make sure you don't mess up the river downstream. What are you gonna do to control turbidity? Good. Is there an issue with trout? Talk to Fish and Wildlife. And Fish and Wildlife said, yeah, we're good. Okay, good. So these are all, common sense things. What you mentioned is the real kicker, is the cost. And we've been going to FEMA with costs, and that's where we kind of go around. And even then, as we mentioned, it's at best 25 cents on the dollar is really a great deal, but that adds up. That's not nothing. Yes.
Yeah, so let me talk a little about FEMA too, because I think also clarify how FEMA works. Unfortunately, we're not a big giant FEMA. I wish we were. We're limited by what Congress has given us the authority to do, which is called the Stafford Act, right? And US Code CFR, right? Generally speaking, what FEMA is allowed to do, which is different than what NRCS can do, we can only provide public assistance, which means, again, a public entity, right? So if it was the town, or if it were the state that owned the land, the state could be an eligible applicant for a part of the land, but in this case, let's talk about the town. So it has to be a public entity. That little pyramid that was shown earlier, that is really important to understand how that works. And the complexity of that little pyramid goes wild very fast. But we're there for public assistance. You can only, under current laws, except for mitigation, and I'll talk about that in a second, we can only provide a town or a public entity the money to repair it the way it was the day before the storm. So if we have a road, the road is completely washed out, but we want to widen the road 3 feet on this side, we want to make the road higher for the next storm, we want it, it has a culvert underneath the road that lets the water go underneath the road. And that culvert was, let's say, an 18-inch diameter culvert. The initial starting point is all we will give you is to repair it just the way it was. If you want to do anything extra, that's on somebody else, the town, the state, somebody else has to do that. We also can't give money and fund something that is the responsibility of another federal agency or an insurance company or something, so we can't duplicate. Why? Because taxpayers say, FEMA, you're the payer of last resort. If there's no other way, that's how a presidential declaration works. All disasters are locally executed. They are state managed and led. And then when it exceeds the capability of the state's capacity or capabilities, they can ask for a major declaration, which is what happened in this case. Now, when it comes to what we can do to mitigate, we have a couple of different ways to mitigate. Take that road. Well, with a proper study, it's called a hydrology study, we can say, you know what? That culvert being 18 inches isn't big enough for the amount of volume of water that blew it out and then took out the road. It really should be upsized to say a 24-inch culvert, right? Or a 40-inch culvert, 48-inch culvert. that we may be able to pay as a mitigation effort to make that road sustained. And where we have done mitigation, and that's for that specific piece of road, so we can mitigate a project, if it's a bridge, you can mitigate that bridge. Well, we can't build a new bridge that's gonna cost $5 million because that bridge isn't high enough. We can't do that, right? So we can do mitigation on that project. That's one way we try to mitigate. Where we've done those mitigation projects in Vermont, where I'm very familiar with, we have similar issues, I have disasters we made. Mitigation we did during Irene, those places held it didn't reflood, right? And some of the current disasters. So mitigation does work. Yes, some of those things we pay 100%, some of those things are 75, 25, we pay 75, we pay 25. But where we've seen those mitigations, it does work. So that's one way to do mitigation. The second way we do mitigation is what we call 404 mitigation. Every disaster, let's say we have a $10 million disaster, we automatically give the state 15% of whatever that total forecast amount is, $10 million, 15% of the 1.5 million. We give that to the state to be able to administer as the state sees their priorities for mitigation for future disasters. And as Dick was explaining earlier, it's a state program. There are a lot of possibilities and it can do all kinds of different things, but it's up to the state and their priorities. The third way is what you heard Dick talk about is the BRIC program. And what I hear tonight, which is probably I've been in FEMA for 5 years, Coast Guard for 30 years. I've been doing disasters for a long time now, in one way or another. But I can tell you, because it will be executed, the key is to have a plan. And what I hear tonight, I hear this town talking about, hearing the visionary plan is, you have had these pictures showing that this town has been flooding for almost 100 years now, and it has the potential to flood. So unfortunately, it's gonna take time to put that in place. Then you look at every opportunity, whether it be FEMA money, whether it be Army Corps of Engineers, whether it be NRCS money, whether it be state money, whether it be taxable-based money, figure out how to whack away at that plan. It won't, unfortunately, it doesn't happen overnight, but it is that mitigation plan for the highest risk areas that we focus first. When it comes to debris in the waterway, and somebody said, I think you were probably the best description I've heard of the problems in New Hampshire rivers and streams ever. And I've been doing that on 6 after looking at New Hampshire Friday or 5. The waterways here, if that water passes over your property, we started looking at them, when we did research on a couple of projects we have in, the trick is going to be sometimes the water, the private owner lets it, but he or she owns into the middle of it. Sometimes it's a business that owns that, and sometimes they own, and people probably don't know, I own the bank on this side of the river, but guess what? You also own the bank on the other side. And so when that water and that debris is in that private property, generally, not always, we are precluded from allowing FEMA federal dollars to pay for something that's owned by a private entity, a business or a private individual. So on the town, we can, if the town decides to do it, and that town will win, state will win. When it goes over the private property, depending on the circumstances, that may not be eligible. I'm not saying it won't be, because we want to look at the circumstances of what is going on. And I know you're looking at some of this down. And I can tell you my goal, Kayla's goal, if we can find a way, a path to find some way to get FEMA eligibility for what you're trying to do with your plan, we will try to do that with buckets that we can manage. Can't promise it, but we will try very hard to work with the state, to look at environmental issues, to look at the state needs, and try to find a way to that pathway for you. That's how FEMA works. I don't know if that helps clarify at all.
That does, thank you.
My name is Paul, I'm the chairman of the planning board of Town of Gorham. I also sit on North Country Council, Royal City Town, North Country Council Regional Planning Commission. I also serve on the District Advisory Committee, the Transportation Advisory Committee. So I'm well aware of these things. I've lived here in this community for longer than I thought. But first of all,
I want to thank you all for making the trip and coming here to discuss this, convoluted and difficult problem and sometimes emotional with us, because we're trying to find a way out of this. And I've sat on the planning board since 1988. And I've been in this town for many, many years. I grew up on Bell Street. We were evacuated twice in my childhood, and then I had to evacuate my mother 3 times after that. So I understand the flooding in that area, the Seagrove. This is gonna be a difficult problem that we are not gonna solve tonight. There is no one answer to trying to deal with all of this. We're gonna have to look at everything. And I believe we're gonna have to look at a long, detailed plan of all the rivers. This, what's the last name? Force. You are absolutely right. All the rivers in this town have been altered, and they've been, man-made. And you can prove that because, for the forestry services and all of that, they were dams made up. Living Pool is on the logging pond. And I am the proud owner of a logging pond on Route 2. But the thing I want to say is that it's my belief that we are entering a situation that we are going to have to look long term. We're going to have to look 100 years down the road on this. And we're not going to be able to come up with simple solutions like, oh, we're going to burn here and fix that, or we do this. It's going to take a lot of different ideas and a lot of different ways of looking at this, and a lot of suggestions from everybody. Burn may work here, and a 2-inch line may work there, and other aspects may work over here. And those are the things we're going to have to look at. We're going to have to look at all these rivers right from where they began, all the way down through. It is my belief that we are going to be seeing much more extreme weather in New England. We're going to see deep, dark droughts that we've never seen before. And then when those are over, we're going to see water coming down that we haven't seen. And trying to plan for that is going to be very, very, I think that's something that we're going to have to do. One of the things I'm convinced is that like I said, I want to be part of the old people who go water. Right on Moose Road. And the thing that has changed my mind about some of all this, the land is down, it's very soft. I can't use it for anything. I use it for trails and as a reserve for the smaller animals in the neighborhood. But it's been flooded 3 times since I was there. And that's not a big deal to me because I expect that. But it also borders my neighbor's land, Mr. George. Now, Mr. Jewell, over the years, when he bought his land, that land has been raised where that pond was, there's 2 ponds. One on my property and one on Mr. Jewell's. I had 5 feet of water in the property. But it's my belief that because that water was able to stabilize and lay in my property, it caused less damage to Mr. Jewell's property. Even though he did sustain quite a bit of damage. So I'm thinking on this, one of the ideas that I would like to see, and I would like to see the state of New Hampshire adopt something like this, because I think it's something that could be very, very important in the future, is that we all know about the current use, what we put with land in current use for so years and get a tax credit on that. Well, I would like to see the state of New Hampshire adopt something like that in a smaller endeavor, for smaller lots and things like that. For attenuation property. I have no plans to develop my property. And I look at it as I personally think I'm doing the town service by allowing the flood every year. But if we can convince other people on the riverbanks to do the same thing, maybe we could give them a little bit of a property tax rate and allow them to do that. So the thing I want to say is that I think this is going to take a long time for us to come, all of us in here, to come together and try to figure out how we can do this. And how we can do this so that people can afford to be able to help themselves too. It's going to take a lot of work, a lot of ingenuity for us to come up with this. But I don't expect this problem to be solved right away. And I look for your help and guidance, give us. And I'm looking for ideas from the rest of my fellow community members to help us come up with a plan that might work. So thank you for coming. I appreciate everything you said.
Well said, Paul.
Yes. Very good. I appreciate the comment and I appreciate everybody being here tonight. And I thank you for participating. New Hampshire actually has 14 open federal declarations starting in 2017. So the town manager says to you that we need to put a plan together. This is a long road. This is a long road. That's the reality. I will share with you that our team has done 4 federal declarations within the last 12 months. Which means that it's speeding up, right? Never once did I think I would be here in January, sitting down talking about flooding that happened after there was 3 feet of snowpack in the woods. That was gone in the afternoon. Okay, I think the town manager said it great at the beginning. He's like, it's Pete and Phil. It's Pete and Phil. That's what we do all day long. Figure out how to do this. These folks need help. And as I'm listening tonight, like the reality and where does the planning start? When you see notices go up for hazard mitigation planning, and your town is looking for input, please participate. I would encourage you to make sure you're not just participating in Gorham. Make sure that you're participating at a regional level. Because of the 14 disasters we have, 6 of them have co-op come. So the reality is your problems are not only your problems, they're your neighbor's problems. And as we collect data, and our team comes out and we're here for the 3rd time in a week, Casper and Bill about damage assessments, he's like, how many more times are you coming back? I'm like, well, the reality is we're scraping everybody together to be able to bring in FEMA to give you as much leverage for financial assistance as possible. The unfortunate part is it's 25 cents on the dollar that yours. So how that long range planning looks from a mitigation standpoint is that document that's going to allow you to say, hey, we got the PPD, we got the moves, we got all these things to look at. How do they fit in there? So when you fill out a permit application, or we're monitoring your hazard mitigation plan, we can say, hey, they're trying to achieve a big step here for the community. It makes the project become that much more successful and get funded that much quicker. So those will have the nut and bolts come together, but the projects are not, these disasters are not simple. This team in mitigation recovery has managed 1,300 projects. Okay? Take COVID out of the way and it's still 1,000. Okay? They work hard, they're trying to get you to yes. DES is trying to get you to yes. DOT is trying to get, everybody wants to get you to yes. The reality is it's having a plan. That's so important in engagement like tonight. It's so critical for us. So we can come back and build a better most around next time.
Thank you, Director. I'll say one of the things that resonated with me, one of our early meetings, I think was the team that brought it up. So think about the person broken down on the side of the road and they're trying to push their car. Everybody's a lot more willing to go help out the person to try to push their car. You know, he who helps themselves versus the person sitting in the car just waiting for somebody to push it for them. And we were seen as a community, we are all pushing the car. You know, the selectmen, Phil and I, the town, we are all pushing the car, you're pushing the car, you're engaged, these things matter. And it makes our partnerships with these folks so much more efficient. And we appreciate that. So, also directly.
Good morning, Carol, I'm the Water and Sewer Commission, amongst other things. My concern is, I know it's going to take a long time to come up with permanent solutions. On the moose, upstream where the work is being done today, the December storm took out all the riprap on one side of the river. It is now just soil. In that, the interim repaired at least so that we have high water again, it won't just take that bank out. If it takes it out, there's only one place for it to go. Once it gets out of the riverbank, my neighbors are gonna have problems, I'm gonna have a problem, and it could go all the way down through the trail path. If it cuts far enough to the left, we'll take out a whole town street and all the water and sewer and all the other utilities. That's it.
And then that's something we've identified, and it gets into this, kind of triangulation of berms are one thing, berms aren't gonna help make it riverbank, you're just gonna road, and that berm is just gonna go plunk. So it's getting the engineering done. So it's not just piling rocks, it's getting the engineering done. NRCS to look at some of these projects, again, they have the parameters for their projects to fund them. I can tell you that we are looking at that, and we're with FEMA on those particular, areas.
I got it. I'm Patrick Sandgren, I live at Brookside Drive in Gorham. I'm not to do my own work, but 25-year member of fire department. I've seen 90% of the floods in this town. I've lived at my property for 22 years. Never, ever, never worried about the flood. That morning, I woke up at 7 o'clock, I knew it was raining, I knew it was physical rain, excuse my French. We're okay, that's my first job. I've been on this river for 22 years, I know it. My father worked in Shelburne for 30-something years, and he knows the river. I wasn't worried. I get a call from Nathan, you need to get home now. He's running through my property. I'm a renter of the property. And the river is starting to reach the bay. By the time I left my house, which was 30 minutes, the water was rushing through my property. Rushing. It was 2 feet of water, but it has never, ever been water. And if I say never, it means been an inch, because it's all riverbed and saves up roads. I was, holy shit, what is going on? I believe I need to step back to Hurricane Irene, know this is about December 18th, but I need to step back to Irene. There was a lot of water. I don't know her address, and I'm sorry, but behind Bob and Egan's house, there is now a horseshoe of a river that is coming down through, scooting out into the airfield, coming back, now hitting the bank behind Mr. Murphy's house, and eroding very, very quickly. If nothing is done, we are going to have a problem getting a trailer. So, back to my story just a little bit more. As the water is rushing over the bank on my rented property, my neighbors are getting flooded, and the water is rushing down to Larry Street. If you all know Larry Street comes down along the railroad tracks, it comes down, I'm gonna guess I'm on an elevation under probably 7 feet. Comes back around, starts working on the Oregon Street. There's a culvert that's probably 100 feet, 200 feet into the woods. I'm on it. That culvert is solid, because there is 12 feet of water coming down Moose River. Nathan runs down the street. The water has now ponded using the railroad tracks as a dike and using the rest of the berm as a dike, and now backing up into the railroad. Something needs to be done. That horseshoe needs to be straightened. I'm not a hydrologist, but I'm common sense. That horseshoe has to be taken care of. That would fix, I don't know, some of the problem. Now I have to worry every single night, are we flooding? Am I gonna wake up to go to the bathroom and step in water in my trailer? Do I have to get called out of work again because I have to go gather, I'm gonna say it, my guns, my documents, my dogs, my wife, my possessions? I'm not on a pad. I have brick on ground. If that's how it comes out, the trailer's gonna drop, we're gonna have problems. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 15 properties on that end of town that could have a problem. And behind on the other side of the road, it's not a fire station, which I'm remember. That could cause a problem. It's not when it's gonna happen or if it's gonna happen. Asheville is gone. Asheville, North Carolina is effing gone. It doesn't exist. I can see the Moose and Moose River, Moose Brook connecting one more time. At some point, it's gonna take a lot of water. But I'm tired of not sleeping of. I can't sleep because I'm worried about if the river's gonna come back into my property. Mike's been there, you've all been there. So I have a little question, Mike and Heath, why hasn't there been any type of water mitigation prior to the Roger era? You could do something, you know, that horseshoe, there's now island, I call there's maples have grown up out of the soil. I rain flooded, packed that full of debris and shot it off into, you know, the air. There was 2 or 3 inches of water down. What's the street? Somebody need help me here. Well, it's
Dublin and
down, water. There's never been water in 22 years of being on the fire department, ever. Has Moose Brook gone into, you know, Ottawa Ave and all that? Sure, of course, I went there and the rest of the lady. Has there been water on Main Street down that way? Every single time it floods. There's never, ever been water on Brookside Drive. Never, not in that fashion. And if you want to see the video, it's on my wife's page. Michelle's answers it. It's Russian. I had 2.5 inches of silt in my yard. So what do? I don't have a long-term waiting period. I understand it's a long-term goal, and we need to do a long-term plan. I need a short-term fix for next May. Because if not, I will have a problem. First of all, I'm not gonna be the one doing the rescue. I'm gonna be the one being rescued. I'll tell you the thing. Mr. Malone has video on his YouTube page of a ice can breaking onto his property. It's a lot of water all at once. And it's going into my property this year. No doubt about it. If I get there to take a piss and I step in the water, I'm gonna summon with a piss. Literally. This is not. Well, to say I've been pondering this for months and months. I looked at the CFSs for the town of Gorham, Cassian Dam, we were at 4,000 CFS at 7 o'clock, cubic feet per second. We topped out 13.7 by 11:30. That's a lot of water in a short amount of time. In 4 hours, that's a lot of water. Y'all can look it up, it's on the English Geology site. That's how I feel. But I'm worried, well, Nathan and Wally's property, I understand that the landowner, I don't know what to say because I'm renting the property. But we have to look at life safety. The hell with the money. I know it's a problem. I know we need to pay people their diesel fuel. Who cares? I work for the wire. I want to send the price to fix all this stuff. I really do. But when I get 10 neighbors, 15 neighbors, their life is down the line. My fire station, our fire truck, our fire station, our bridge. Life safety can't trump any money right now. Again, there's a lot of water that came down that river and it hasn't been cleaned up since, I don't know how. I really don't know. I just remember being cleaned up and the kids were mad at this swimming hole. That's what I remember. Hey, you know,
Yeah, I want to say that, I'm thinking that, and you're not the only one, there are many people
now, 100% agree.
that are, when it rains, it's literally, you have a heart palpitation, you get the anxiety, people are selling, thinking about selling, so you are far from. I don't need to,
But I also, can I just get the answer? He's and Mike, why hasn't there been any type of flood mitigation prior to this? And I only point this to you, the 2 of you, because y'all know the selections were many times throughout the years, you were allowed to water there, so on and so forth. But why hasn't there been any, after I read, why wasn't that actually that? Sorry.
So, you guys know. I saw it in the answer. All right. Listen, you came in during voting for the video, and there was the three of us sitting right over there. They remember that. You showed that to me, and that was the first time I knew about your problem. So I did something about it. And that's why the town manager and Phil focused on Gateway Trailer Park with an NRCS application. Now, why is that important? Because of what you've heard from the folks gathered here today, is they all want to help. And that's true, they all do. But very, well, pretty much none of them can help immediately. Your town can, but guess what? It's private property. And guess what? We only have so much money in the funds to address it. Town meeting over the years has been less than enthusiastic about just grabbing a big chunk of cash and spending it. So you have a situation where NRCS is the game that you have to play with in the immediate after. They can come in and get stuff done, you're seeing it. You've got $750,000 worth of work that has finally been acted on in a period of just several weeks. Those projects will be completed. And the armoring is a vast improvement over what was there after the 18th of December. So when you look across the river at Bellevue, you know, I wish they could have built that bigger and higher, but that's what we got. The property owner, they paid their 25%, and they got 75% of the work done. Same thing happened over on Route 16. All right. NRCS came in, and people will correct me, or Phil will correct me if I get the scenario wrong, but we didn't receive a super warm and fuzzy result the first time we approached on doing an NRCS project. Those guys, Pete and Phil, were relentless, and they finally got a go-ahead. And then the original plan that came out, they looked at it, as did the selectmen, and said, you gotta do better. Did it, went back. Better means more money. At the end of the day, they had a project that had a value of $160,000. Now, here's the thing. You'll get $160,000 worth of dirt. It's more. There's been a lot of talking about permitting here tonight. And I have to say, I haven't met anyone in the permitting business who, as I said, they're there to help. And I don't think they're lying. But there's a time factor in permitting, and it can be enormous, slow. And when engineering is involved, you can spend more on the engineering plan for the fix than you do on the actual dirt. Yeah, it's all done. So when NRCS comes in and they give you $160,000 project, they're also giving you all those permits. Now, it's true, when you first look at it, you haven't got the permits. But it's also absolutely true that they're a federal agency who's always working with state agencies, and they all speak the same language. And unless there is really something unusual wrong with your site, they're going to get those. And it's all going to get put together in a very short period of time. The town did it. The property owner chose not to pay the 25%, the project was dead. I don't know what else to tell you. We were also there. We were also there for people. Okay? And FEMA was very, very encouraging. And they were very honest. Like, and I'm paraphrasing. You don't want this done this year. And it's like, well, yeah, we can do. And, well, yeah, no,
So this, when we talk about bird grant over here, and it's gonna be years. But the hope is that we get through that, and then we can get a machine in the water. This is why the NRCS stand was so critical. Now the natural comeback, I'm gonna jump ahead of you, is Mike. Just have the town spend $40,000. And there are 3 selectmen here that could have voted just to do that. Let me tell you what happened when the town spent $5. Just 5. That's what we spent. Yeah, Dennis Hartman, Mr. McCucci, these guys, they benefit from that. But the public streets they live on also benefited, because the giant that breach down by them, it was a small breach. And we can get in and fix that right away and not lose Water Street or, Broadway, right? So we did that. The 25% thing, just this year alone, would have amounted to $250,000 taxpayers would have picked up, and would have cleaned out every single account we have that has anything to do with flood control. And the way this has been handled in other towns, when I read that did happen down in Bartlett, New Hampshire, in Chandler, was kind of, the head of politics down there. He had to call a special town meeting to get the money together. And I have to tell you, it's not, tonight, we can have a unanimous vote. But when you're out and about in town, not everybody thinks well of us within 100-year flood zones. By the way, I live in a 100-year flood zone. I can see the Amsterdam River. And even when I'm 101, when I'll still be able to hit it with a golf ball from my property. It's right there. So I get it. What we need to do right now, as quickly as we can, since that NRCS is now off the table, it's gone. You're stuck with what you have. Is to try and find a way to create some kind of barrier that the property owner will accept. So we have to be in partnership with the courts. They have to want us to fix it. All right, we have to have a plan that we can get permitted and is affordable. And while we're at it, just, that's such an amazing event. What you said of Dublin Street, a lot of people don't realize, is that water. It came up, and this has never happened. It went over here, and went down into a boulder, into culverts that most people who lived there all their lives didn't know existed. And then it flooded the middle of town. So a half mile away from the Moose River, you had flooding. And people had no idea where it was coming from. That's what it was. So anyhow, that has to be the most disappointing answer anyone ever asked me. But and I'm willing to have Phil or Steve or someone tell me differently. But right now there is some answer.
And I will say, I do appreciate everything that everybody's done to try to mitigate this. I am on our side, amazed, very close.
So,
I just wanted to address that forestry washout that's occurred as we talked about the airport access road. We did have NRCS look at it. It does not fall under their projects just due to water protection stuff. We are working with Chris at AGB to present a plan fix to FEMA for funding. Again, as we've heard, it's not a bad process. I'm extremely hopeful that we can do something about that next summer. But a lot of that stands out of my control. We can only push so hard. FEMA is so busy doing everything for everybody that they're doing what they can, and it's not an endless stream of money, as you've heard tonight. We all know that. But know that we are working towards fixing that horseshoe issue as well, because I know that has a potential to cause issues for you guys and for the Dublin Street neighborhood as well.
like I said, I appreciate everyone.
I know it can be frustrating for everybody, believe me, I've been pounding my head against the wall now for 10 months. Trying to help people the best we can, I was very fortunate, my house did not get flooded, but I probably spend at least 2 to 3 hours a day, every day in my working life dealing with trying to help the town get straightened out from this flooding. And Peter the same, it's not easy.
It's a process, but, you're worth it. You're worth it, that's what we
I
got.
hope so, it's gonna, in the year, 25 years of the fire department, I know it hurt.
We love you, Pat.
Oh, I love you.
Okay, now we're crossing.
Okay.
Anybody else? Murphy?
I'm just curious, I thought I heard one of these gentlemen here, I'm not sure the lady, talking about taking out debris, putting the river back to where it was before this storm. Those 4 restaurants in that river now weren't there before this storm. There's 4 of them. Rich and Diane, who's the property over it. We are, and everywhere that turns, is taking property with it, on both sides. So why can't we get in there, put that river back to where it was before this storm?
Anybody on the board? Anybody? Go ahead.
So. If you put that back, here's my question. If you put fill in and put that back to where you think it used to be, how will that affect the person upstream of you, downstream of you, and across the river with you?
It lasted 25 years.
So, I know that seems like a really easy solution.
I thought you said, can't. That, with that is taking on his property, the river was 300 feet to one side, where the berm still is. If those trees and those alders were taken out, that river flowed for 22 years of life in there, zero problem. But zero problem. And if the fix that wasn't made prior to that burns not. If that wasn't fixed, that river would have gone straight down the side.
So here's the deal, as I said earlier, people are gonna do something with this river, y'all are gonna get. Eventually, there's gonna be a series of plans to do something with this river, and you're gonna choose what's important to you as a community, as individuals, and where the sacrifices are. Are you gonna have the perfect answer? One of the things I was gonna say is be patient with your selectmen. Rivers never do what you want them to do. The best engineer in the world, the best geomorphologist in the world. You do something, you're sure a river's gonna respond in a certain way? No, it ain't. So your first plan as a town, you don't wanna wait until you have a perfect plan, because a perfect plan doesn't exist. One of the things I would tell you is it's time to start looking for the things that you can do now, and you slowly build outward. And DES historically talk about things that have changed. We used to tell you, you need to tell us exactly what's gonna work, and we'll permit exactly what's gonna work. And then once you have that permit, that's what you're stuck with. Well, the truth of the matter, that don't work. We need to be working with folks in river communities to issue permits that are easily amendable. We're going to start with this, we're gonna see how the river responds, and adjust accordingly. If you go out there and you guys do this, maybe, as I said, maybe that's what this comes down to, is everybody's gonna put the river back where it needs to be, you're gonna build dikes up either side of it, levees, call them what you will. Might work, might not. Understand it. If you do that work and we issue that permit, and it doesn't go the way you want, you're on the hook for it. That's why everybody gets so tense, that's why everybody gets going out. If you do that work, and it goes across the river and takes up somebody else's house, or it starts to erode the neighbor upstream, somebody gets like, that's fine. Yeah, straighten it back out. Straighten that river out. Straightening that river out, straightening out the roots and feeding. That's what got y'all here in the first place. Somebody, once upon a time, it seemed like a good idea. And if that's the only thing.
I lived in the park when I was a little kid, and that river was great. There was no S turns. That island was not there.
That was done,
That island is collecting debris, every storm that goes down that river. And it keeps building up. And that's why you say you're gonna fix the ATV walkway trail on the other side. There's no fixing it, because that river will still go onto that bank and, you know, get our bank. If you don't take out that, the island needs to go. And the pile of rocks that divides the river, in the middle, break it down to our house, break it down. It's divided, the mega pile of rocks that have come off from the bank, up the river and come down, and so that's there.
I have a feeling.
That is history.
We in the trail park don't have time. We don't have time. I know everybody's working on time, I probably just heard it there a little bit, but we don't have next year to do something. We don't have another storm. We don't.
So here's the question. Well, first of all, the straightening of the river happened in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and before that, which I'm sure you were not there to see. In the time that you've been there, it's always been straight. But the history of logging and the history of Gorham is older than that. The river was modified a long time ago by timbermen. This is what it is. It's trying to return to something that's more natural equilibrium for it. Now, if people live on both sides of it and that's not acceptable for us as a society, then what you're gonna come down to, what your engineering is gonna come back to is, we're just gonna keep paying on a regular basis, build berms and dredge. That might be your solution. In the meantime, what I said about temporary zone, you're not gonna wait till you have a perfect plan. Well, it's taking time to figure that out, if that's the ultimate solution. It's not good to hear that this gentleman's got an exposed dirt bank and this gentleman's got an exposed dirt bank. There are things we can do that are temporary band-aids to at least keep it from getting worse. Like, there are permitting avenues for temporary fixes. Again, it's gonna come down to, do you have the material? Because I know one of the things that we tend to end up in is in that first several weeks after, just finding somebody with a spare piece of equipment, like the truck, the price of stone, the price of gravel, like, can you get to the site? Can you get the material for a temporary stabilization? We can work on a temporary stabilization plan to at least try to hold it until you get a permanent solution. So don't think that you have to have, I think that's probably one of the most important things. DEF wasn't always as flexible as we now acknowledge we need to be. That's actually more of a positive change. We know that we're going to be working with you over the years to fine-tune something for this river system. But in the meantime, good God, we don't expect that no one's gonna do any work until you have the final plan. There are things that need Band-Aids to get them through. There are ways that we can do that. Somebody, again, has to do the work.
So where do we go with buying permits? So we don't feel like to be able to.
The DES, they work with everybody.
Yeah.
They don't have to work with this, we can be actually paid to work with too. They're happy to work with you as property owners. Could be a contractor that you have that maybe has a relationship with DES, but.
What material do you, like, again, it would have to be on we have a regional inspector for the North Country. We've also got our regular infrastructure people that we've been having fill in. We're trying to dedicate as many people to the project. What was that?
And they, see the director, so
Actually, yes, they were up here telling you guys to fix your berms. So, yeah, so they've been up here and they'll see it, but they're not going to go to your property and tell you how to fix your land. They need you to come to them and say, I need to fix will this work, and can I get a permit for this? If you contact us, contact DES, you can go online to our website, with regional inspector contact. You contact the regional inspector, or you just call the main line, 271-2147, say, I need to talk to somebody about an emergency permit to Gorham. We will get you moving in the right direction. You can go on to our website, type in emergency DES, www.nh.des.gov, type in emergency authorization, it will pull you to our form. You can apply for it online.
I was told that the private path for filling out any of that.
Is that true?
That it's 2 weeks from the time of discovery, and the truth of the matter is, if you've got an exposed bank and you get property at risk, it's still an emergency, it's still going to fail.
They found that number, they told me that process had passed, we had a lengthy other process that we had to.
No, emergency is from the time, it's not the storm, it's the time of discovery. And if it comes down between us making a decision between, hey, we're just gonna let this disaster happen because you're 2 weeks past, or, yeah, that's really messed up, and somebody needs to put some riprap on that. No, we're gonna probably give you a way to put some riprap on it, at least enough to hold it in place.
So Darlene, so are you saying, so if there's a, federal disaster declaration for an area, is that what enables a landowner? No, so at any time, I have a hole underneath my property that two projects worked on. Are you telling me that I could petition the DPS right now, all of that work could be done from my property, above the thing? And I can petition you at this moment to put that bird back in from, if I pay for it.
So, yeah, so what we have is an emergency authorization process. There are two separate processes. One is for when you're in the middle of stuff. If the flood is ongoing, you've got something where I'm gonna lose that bridge if I don't clean this out. Or I'm gonna lose that abutment if I don't throw some rock in front of it. You throw some rock in front of it, flood goes down, a couple days later, you're like, oh yeah. We have an online reporting system where you can just go in and say, during the emergency, we did this work, because if we didn't do it, we would lose the bridge. Obviously, you're not gonna make the final layer for the emergency, there's too much stuff going on. But you threw some stuff in there to hopefully to mitigate the risk. You just report that. We will then acknowledge that under our rules, that met the rules. And then if there is a disaster declaration, you can use that paperwork to say, when I did that work, hospital materials, when I did that work, it was part of the disaster, and that becomes something that you give to FEMA as if it's a public project and it's PA only, you then give that to FEMA, say, that work right there.
Sensitive to the incident, I guess that's what I was asking. That's
It's
the
supposed
question.
to be, but we're still accepting it from the 2020 floods, because
Okay.
people didn't know, because with everybody's education stuff. Like, there's no question that there's so much there's such a lack of information out there. Most people think you have to wait for the declaration to file the paperwork. And for the state of New Hampshire, no, as soon as you get the work, just file. Because we're not gonna charge you for it. We're gonna say, yeah, in the emergency, you need to do that. Here's the CYA paperwork, if anybody asks. So not only is that work that we did during the emergency cover, but then you can say, well, that was just temporary, now I gotta go back and do it what? And then you can come in and say, if it's really unstable, I need an emergency authorization, to put a bigger Band-Aid on this. Or if it's whole, you're gonna come in for your permit to actually do it the right way.
Is that a new thought? You said that you guys are involved. Is that a new thought process?
So that rule has actually been on the books for 30 years, but we just built the process last spring. So it is now available, it's all online. The emergency authorization is a little different. Emergency authorization might not be a natural disaster at all. Let's say you showed up at your house, you have whatever property, you come in and you notice that there's a sinkhole, something happened. Suddenly, there's a piece of your foundation exposed. There's something that's like, hi, I need to fix this, and I really need to fix this now. There's an imminent threat of property damage. I'm going to fix this by dumping this much rock in this area. It's gonna be about this much diameter. Here's a photo of the problem I'm trying to fix. Send that in. We will look at that and say, yeah, don't want your house to fall in. Absolutely not. If the work you're doing is something that this is just temporary, we'll send you an emergency authorization that says you got 2 weeks to get this done, basically. If you need more time, then let us know. And then when you're done, file a permit for long-term repairs if it's needed. And if it's something where frequently town has a culvert that developed, talk the culvert walks out, you can't see that happening. Suddenly you have a sinkhole in the middle of the road. There's no flood event, it's just like, sinkhole, someone's gonna die, they hit this. They'll come in, emergency authorization, replace the culvert. There's no, once the culvert's in, there's no need to do additional permitting because the culvert's in. So we're like, yep, EA, done and by. A lot of these things, I think this gentleman over here and the gentleman in the back, you probably contact us about, can you do an EA to at least keep it from getting any worse? Tell them you're at the meeting, tell them the bureau administrator said, I need to contact you because I'm probably eligible for EA. Send them a picture, they're gonna ask you for an email address, they'll give you an email address. Email us pictures, say, this is what it is. You've already emailed, who did you email?
So this is very great, these are great questions. So again, EPS is on your property. And Phil and I have told people this many times, it's easy to work with a permit. Contractor, you might not want the permitting, but if you have a contractor, they probably do know the permitting process, and it's not that, or if I can go through it, you can go through it. And it is a very quick turnaround, they're very understanding, some of the permits like this work, and our PS stuff was a month after. And, very easy process to work with. The kicker though, if you mentioned this before, was the cost. So you get the permit, and it's on your land, if you wanna do some work, if you're not gonna be in the river, that maybe it's a different permit, the river right down, or it's just that cost piece. As far as I wanna go up the river and start bulldozing, and taking out corners and river out on somebody else's land, that's not, you
Well,
can't
you
get a
can,
permit.
and you can look at some innovative solutions, you can look at, you can't afford the stone. You can look at root walls, timber, Jersey birds, because it doesn't have to be the final full-term,
Right.
long-term fix. But at least no one here should be sitting in a situation where you have an exposed bank and thinking, I can't do that, and I have to just sit back and take that. There are many different solutions, but the EA is designed to at least make sure that you can keep it from getting worse.
Does it have to be mineral based? Can you give me a little visibility on?
Probably not salvage automobiles, I don't know.
No, that has to be done. That has to be done.
I think the important part is that
What do you have in mind to use?
Oh, no, I was just curious if you've been up against some journey barriers that are fairly innovative, differently than done before, and any requests.
We've seen people use root walls, we basically take a
I've seen that, I've seen root boards in mineral.
you can do it that way. I mean, if it's a small, I don't think anybody here has got anything that's tarred and sandbag, it sounds like y'all are way beyond that. But if you've got something, if you have an innovative solution, and this is like a temporary fix, get me through a certain amount of time. No one here should be under the impression that you have to let something sit completely exposed. Because environmentally, that's no better, like, we don't wanna see that slug and sediment go downstream any more than you do.
Well, maybe avians be used in my situation. Well, maybe we're getting too into the.
I mean, that's
specific. That's okay, no, but
But if
thank
you
you
have
very
something you
much.
can take out, put in, take out. By all means, contact us about the EA process.
So we're shooting for 8 o'clock. I'm glad we went over because it was a great discussion. I guess I would thank the entire panel. Does anybody have any last thoughts? Because you all have to get back home.
I just add one quick thing, as far as the riverbank stabilization work goes, it's important that you do get a permit, you do work with DES to do this work. You don't want to be caught doing that work and doing it wrong, because the liability will rest with you and it needs to be done properly, so that's an important piece too. If you decide to look forward to doing your own work, you need to make sure you're going to DES with a plan for what you want to do, and then working for them to get it permitted and ensuring that it's done to the permit.
Thank you.
I got one.
Oh, sure.
The emergency permit that you were talking about, is that only for landowners, or could the town submit an emergency permit as well?
Like, the town wants to submit it for,
that river, like the Moose River, help fix more of it, like part of the public trailer park that needs to be fixed, that's on the town property and stuff like that.
the town can submit to do work on an individual's land with that person's agreement, the individual can do, as long as you have an applicant and you have a landowner and the landowner is signed off, it's okay. Yeah, like, the town is my contractor for this project, or this person is my contractor for this project. The key is that whoever is doing the work's got permission to be there.
Okay, and then I do have one other quick thing that I wanted to. Sure. Back in like the I'd say early nineties, late eighties or whatever, that I can remember doing some dredging on the river and stuff. There was always, we've been talking a little bit about having some canals the water could flow into. And when that dredging was done in those times, there were some of those outlets put up closer up by, Gorham Hill. But over the years, they weren't maintained and they were blocked by debris, blocked by rocks. So when the river got high, it wouldn't flow into those areas until it was too late and the water was already high on the set. So if you guys, if the town decides to make these areas so people can flood, so areas can flood, who's gonna maintain those so they'll work properly when we get flooding? Because that hasn't worked in the past, because everybody says it's not their responsibility to maintain it.
Right, well, one is a quick question, it's people's property, it's town property?
No, it's not, it's town property that it would have flooded.
Right, it depends, if it's town property, we could decide to have an attenuation zone or not. If it's other people's property, that gets really tricky if we're in a wellhead protection zone. I'm sure the water sewer commissioners don't want us to turn the airport or the water protection zone to a floodplain. We've not intentionally.
Actually, by design, the airport is the reef, so.
Is that where you decide for that, and Bellevue is the way to go, to save the town downtown? So yeah, no, those are ideas that we are thinking about. Then it's just a money issue that comes up, you know, what would that cost, the engineering for it? Again, it can't be Pete and Phil go to DES, we got an idea, we just wanna see what happens and what's not. But
Yes,
yes,
a lot of money, to do a little bit of stuff, it's rock, water, flow into the area. You know?
yeah, no, so,
Well, Nathan, also just that, you know, there's a lot of those type of things that we just don't know. We don't, me and Peter don't have the historical knowledge, so if you do know something like that, at least let us know, we can get out, put our eyes on it. Maybe there is something we can easily fix to make that, you know.
Go there.
Yeah, let me know if you wanna show me where that is, if it's something we can do easy enough, then we can definitely look at doing it. It doesn't sound like it's a DES issue, like the Pug River, you know, stuff like that, we can look at. We don't know all of that stuff.
especially town property. So, thank you all very much. This could be the first of many. Oh, one more question, yes.
Speaking to the city of Gorham, 75 feet, I live on Broadway. The repair you did, behind Vashos and along the bank, is that considered a temporary repair?
Everything is that was done under a treating permit. We went out and we did it. It was a relatively affordable, small project. We were put together by DPW crew. So yes, that is seen as a repair that will watch it. And
Because my only concern was no earth put in with the rods, correct?
oh, right, vegetated.
Yeah, so will that go through it like Swiss cheese? I mean, I know it'll help a bit, but I think some earth in with that. And again, I appreciate that it was done in the first place. I'm not complaining, I'm just wondering future.
No, we would monitor that, and we have a plan in place. I know our federal and state partners like monitoring plans. So we are adopting those as official policy, that we actually go on. So yes, that would be something we can do. Thank you. You're welcome. So the board still is in session. If there aren't any other questions, I will thank the panelists. Again, it was wonderful you were here and connected to the